Hello everybody, I've got a lot to talk about this time, as usual, so I'm just gonna gallop right on into it, starting with number 1, The List of Adrian Messenger from 1963. This one was recommended a couple years ago by CLM. It's a clever murder mystery starring George C. Scott as an intelligence man investigating a series of seemingly unrelated deaths. This movie lists a lot of famous names in its opening credits. Besides Scott, there's Dana Winter, Herbert Marshall, Kirk Douglas, Robert Mitchum, Tony Curtis, Frank Sinatra, Burt Lancaster, Gladys Cooper, but you probably won't recognize a few of them because they appear heavily disguised. The makeup department on this movie did some brilliant work. It reminded me a little of 1949's black comedy Kind Hearts and Coronets with Alec Guinness and Dennis Price. What with the string of deaths striking the posh upper class, the quirky English tone, and all the disguises, some of which serve a purpose in the story, while others do not. This mystery ends with a very satisfying climax, and should you watch it, you want to be sure and wait through the end credits, where all hidden identities are revealed in a very entertaining sequence. Movie number 2 is The Setup from 1949. This one was recommended by Tom from Monster Movie House. This is a boxing movie. That's not something I usually go for, but I make an exception occasionally if the movie's really good, and this one is. Robert Ryan stars as an aging boxer who doesn't know that his handlers have made a deal on the side with a powerful gang leader to throw the match. Events occur in real time. This is one of the earliest examples of that storytelling technique on film, and it's very finely executed in a way that ratchets up the tension. Robert Ryan and co-star Audrey Totter as his anguished wife make a compelling pair of leads. It's always nice to see Ryan not playing a despicable bad guy. He did it well, but it's often left me with a distasteful impression of Ryan himself, which isn't fair, so a more positive role like this is a welcome change. Another really good movie where Ryan isn't a hateful villain, 1951's On Dangerous Ground. A major theme in the movie is the viciousness and changeability of the spectators. First, they're screaming out against you, then something changes, and suddenly they're cheering for you. The only constant is their bloodthirsty craving for a fight. The boxer's life we see both in and out of the ring is a desperate, grueling one, with little reward as his glory days draw to a close. That sounds depressing, and it is, but trust me, this was a really good movie. Movie number 3 is Phantom Thread from 2017. Originally, I hadn't been interested in seeing this movie at all. It didn't look very exciting, and I assumed from the ads that it was a typical, complicated May-December relationship movie. However, I changed my mind after I watched a video essay on it by Jack's Movie Reviews. The video contains spoilers, but since I wasn't planning to watch the movie, that was okay, I didn't mind. But surprisingly, this was one of those cases where finding out what happens at the end of the movie actually made me more inclined to see it. Phantom Thread is a 1950s period film that stars Daniel Day-Lewis, in his last film supposedly, unless he changes his mind about retirement, as a world-renowned dressmaker whose rigid perfectionist lifestyle is upended when he meets and falls in love with a young waitress. That doesn't sound like the plot of a suspenseful movie, but everything about it had me on edge right from the start, and maybe it's because I already knew the ending, I'm not sure. A lot of the tension stems from uncomfortable friction between the three main characters, the designer, his sister, and his lover, all who have strong wills of their own. The movie was directed by Paul Thomas Anderson, who previously directed Day-Lewis in There Will Be Blood, and I thought he did a great job creating an atmosphere of pseudo-realism, in which the superlative glamour of the ultra-sophisticated, typified by rich fabrics and luscious gowns, is counterbalanced with awkward domestic situations and frustrating arguments where one party annoyingly says the same thing over and over, while the other party gets so flustered that they trip over their words. There's a phenomenal use of sound, especially in one particular breakfast scene, and then all these elements culminate in this bizarre, disturbing ending with an insane, twisted resolution that somehow gives the characters what they want. Considering that I was pretty stressed through the whole thing and I can't decide how I feel about the ending, I'm not sure how much I enjoyed it, but it was well made, well acted, well done all around. It was memorable, and it was thought-provoking. Movie number 4 is A Warm December from 1973. Now, I'm not sure if I should include this one or not because I kind of watched it from another room while I was working on a video, so there were some parts I missed. But what I did see was good. Sidney Poitier plays a widowed doctor on a trip with his daughter. He keeps coming across a mysterious young woman who seems to be running away from certain men, as well as from himself. Her behavior is both strange and winsome, and in spite of her attempts to elude him, Poitier can't help trying to figure out what is going on with her. Poitier both starred in and directed this movie. His character is very charming, and his co-star, Esther Anderson, who I don't think I've ever seen before, is particularly luminous and expressive. It's a compelling story, a little funny, a little sad. The fact I've had a hard time finding images from it on the internet tells me it's not super well known these days, but I enjoyed what I saw of it, and so did my mom, who was actually the one in the room watching it. Movie number 5 is Carrie's War from 2004. This is a war story about a young girl and her little brother who are sent out to the country during the London Blitz. They are reluctantly taken in by a demure woman and her autocratic older brother, and though at first the adjustment to the new place and new people is rough, they gradually settle into their temporary home, actually getting deeply involved in a family split. Based purely on this DVD cover, I thought it would be about a precocious little girl constantly getting into trouble, but it wasn't really. Carrie is actually quite mature and responsible and does a good job looking after herself and her brother in her mother's place. Unfortunately, the movie's only 90 minutes long, and at a certain point it starts to feel rushed. Where it really started to lose me was when it flashed forward to the 70s, and it seemed like the ending didn't quite fit with what had come before. Still, I liked it better than I expected to, plus it had Alan Armstrong in it, among other recognizable faces like Pauline Quirk and Geraldine McEwen, and that's always a plus when watching a public television production like this. Movie number 6 is The Cruel Sea from 1953. There are a number of old war movies, a lot of them British, but not exclusively, that focus on the crew of one particular ship as it navigates the highs and lows, wins and losses of World War II. This is one of those movies, following a naval escort ship commanded by Jack Hawkins. I really enjoyed this one a lot. I like old war movies, and I like ocean survival stories, so this was a very pleasing combination. I don't always love Jack Hawkins, but I think this might be my favorite performance of his I've seen thus far. Like in the case of Robert Ryan in The Setup, it was nice to see him playing against type. Hawkins so often played smarmy or blustery officials, whereas this character feels more like a regular guy struggling under the weight of responsibility. I liked the story and the different characterizations, and it has good writing too. At one point, Hawkins delivers a line in reference to green sailors gaining experience over time about them learning to die without giving anyone any trouble. That stuck with me. Movie number 7 is Dracula from 1974. This one was recommended by David Chisholm and Maya Adobe. This is a lesser-known version of Bram Stoker's gothic vampire novel, directed by Dan Curtis, written by Richard Matheson, and starring Jack Palance as the Count. I never would have considered him as a likely candidate to play Dracula before, but I get it now. The more I see of him on film, the more I realize how capable he was of being very menacing and severe and downright spooky sometimes, but he could also be very tender and gentle. His Dracula is all those things, which is interesting. This adaptation follows the book pretty closely to a point. It does introduce the Dracula looking for his reincarnated love angle, something that certain later versions adopted, and it gets rid of almost all the other male characters, boiling it down to Jonathan Harker, Van Helsing, and Arthur Holmwood. His increased prominence is unusual, as Arthur Holmwood is often one of the characters who gets cut out of the script. Another thing I noticed was the emphasis on the color red in the set design and in the bright, saturated cinematography. It makes sense. Red, blood, vampires, you know. Movie number 8 is One Against the Wind from 1991. It's another war movie. This was one I randomly discovered when I was following links on IMDb one night. Luckily, I immediately found a good quality upload of it on YouTube, and we didn't waste any time checking it out. It's a TV movie based on a true story. Judy Davis plays Mary Lindell, a countess who used her social position and her own gussiness to sneak English soldiers out of German-occupied France. If that plot sounds a little familiar, it's because I have talked about a couple other movies like that recently, fictional ones. Anyway, I really enjoyed this. Judy Davis was great, full of gumption, as a lot of her characters are, and her co-star Sam Neill plays the English officer who is her first accidental rescue. I guess I'll mention that in very recent years, Mary Lindell has become a subject of controversy, as a 2015 biography disputed her allegiance to the French resistance and painted her in a much less heroic light, but I don't know anything about that. I just saw the movie, and it was a really good movie. Movie number 9 is A Matter of Life and Death from 1946. This one was recommended by several of you, Iacona23, Petty Tyrant, Onion Ring. It is yet another war movie, but the last one of this month, also known as Stairway to Heaven. David Niven plays an RAF pilot who makes radio contact with an American servicewoman, played by Kim Hunter, just moments before he bails out of his plane, and the two make a connection before he jumps to certain death. However, he manages to survive the fall, thereby cheating death, and wastes no time finding the girl. But because he failed to appear in the afterlife at the appointed time, and he refuses to come now, he must plead his case to remain alive in a heavenly courtroom. This is a Powell and Pressburger film and has all the hallmarks of it: gorgeous color photography and crystal clear images, special effects ahead of their time, charming English characters, clever dialogue, and certain touches of the fantastic. Heaven is depicted as a rather homologous society that has the opposite appearance of what one might expect. Where life on Earth is in vivid color, the scenes in heaven are stark black and white, and the running of operations there is rigid and bureaucratic, almost like an office or academic hall, while Earth is more of an idyllic place where people are relaxed and enjoying themselves. Personally, I find it a little topsy-turvy, but clearly the filmmakers were aiming to make one look far more desirable than the other. It's an interesting and amusing movie. There have been Powell and Pressburger films I enjoyed more on the whole, but this one's certainly one of their most visually stunning. Movie number 10 is What We Do in the Shadows from 2014. This one was recommended by Onion Ring, I think after I expressed my enjoyment of Hunt for the Wilder People. This is an extremely entertaining movie filmed in the documentary style about 4 vampires living together as flatmates in New Zealand. A film crew records events in their day-to-day lives, or night-to-night lives, undead lives, from grumpy meetings over who has to do the dishes to semi-successful attempts to go out on the town. I don't think there's a single bit of vampire lore left untouched, as the film shows the vampires in a variety of bizarrely commonplace situations. All the stereotypes are there, and then some, and it also goes into their ongoing feud with werewolves. The characters and scenarios are hilarious, and all 4 of the main vampires, Viago, Vladislav, Deacon, and Peter, have lovable personalities, even if sometimes they can be a little creepy. It's all a little bit absurd and insane and a little naughty. Parts I enjoyed the most were their struggles to grasp new technology, their fashion sense that is so outdated it might actually be stylish again, their friendly treatment of human stew, the clueless police call, and pretty much anything having to do with Peter. Movie number 11 is The Street with No Name from 1948. This one's a sort of docudrama about an FBI agent, played by Mark Stevens, going undercover to track down a murderous gang leader and infiltrate his group in order to get the evidence needed to arrest him. Stevens does a fine job as the lead, but the big ticket here is an actor who frequently appears in these monthly lists, Richard Widmark playing the head gangster. Widmark was awfully good at playing creepy killers. Just the year before this, he'd made his film debut in Kiss of Death as Tommy Udo, who's about as crazy a psychopath as you could get on film in 1947. I noticed he does a lot of extra business in this role, eating an apple, using nasal spray, obsessing about rooms getting too cold. I wondered if any of this was written into the script or not. It sure helped capture my attention and secured Widmark's spotlight. This was a tense movie, and I liked it. Movie number 12 is Robot and Frank from 2012. This one's a bittersweet comedy drama about retired cat burglar Frank, played by Frank Langella, whose worrying signs of dementia cause one of his kids to give him a robot to take care of him. Frank is a curmudgeon even on his best days, and he's bitterly opposed to the robot until he figures out that the robot may be useful to him in committing his next crime. What follows is a really good movie, sometimes funny, sometimes sad, sometimes heartwarming. Langella does a fine job acting opposite the robot, which is voiced by Peter Sarsgaard. I don't know how exactly movie makers manage to give robots such appealing mannerisms that make you end up liking them better than a lot of the human characters. This is set, of course, in a near future where robot companions and robots in the workplace are a regular thing. There's also a nice subplot involving Frank and the local librarian, which I quite enjoyed. For a relatively short movie, it's only 85 minutes long, it deals with a lot of topics. Aging, family, friendship, old traditions versus new technology, know-it-all youth versus experienced maturity, and I think it handled all of this quite well. Movie number 13 is Dark Water from 2002. This is a Japanese horror movie about a woman in the middle of a custody battle who moves into a new apartment with her little girl. But they find that the apartment has a leak that is steadily growing worse, and there seems to be a mysterious presence lurking nearby. I would describe this as a slow burn horror movie. It tends to focus more on establishing atmosphere and mood than on jump scares and graphic imagery. And they made a good choice when they decided to set the bulk of the action in a poorly lit apartment building with a rickety elevator where other residents are seldom seen and the manager ignores all your requests for assistance. I enjoyed the film, but found it got a little confusing in the end. The climactic build-up was really good, but then it was as if there was one reveal too many, and I felt a little lost as I tried to piece things together. I also feel like it should have ended sooner than it did. The final sequence is a flash forward that didn't seem to have a clear purpose. But I enjoyed the movie as a whole. My mom and I watched it on a rainy day, which turned out to be very appropriate as rain is a recurring image in the movie. I love it when things work out that way. And our last movie for the month is number 14, Sudden Fear from 1952. This has been on my list for a while, but I wasn't in too much of a hurry to get to it until my brother watched it and urged us to check it out sooner than later. It stars Joan Crawford, who also produced, as a wealthy playwright who fires an actor, played by Jack Palance, from the lead role in her play because he doesn't have the look of a romantic leading man. But soon after, she ends up meeting him on a train and falls in love, and they marry. However, you knew there was a however, right? Things might not be as they seem. If you're looking to spend an evening with an extremely tense noirish thriller, this would be a good choice. In addition to the twists that push the dramatic tension almost to the breaking point, it also makes great artistic use of music, with a score by Elmer Bernstein, and sound, lots of sequences having no music at all, which just ups the suspense, and location, the majority of the movie being set in San Francisco. And actors Joan Crawford, Jack Palance, and Gloria Grahame give it their all. This is one of the more sympathetic roles I've seen Crawford play, and I was struck yet again with Palance's unique ability to play two sides with equal intensity and conviction. Without saying too much, I think a lot of the movie's first half rides on his performance, while the second half relies more on Crawford. That they both deliver such convincing, engaging performances is a large part of what makes this one such a success. Check it out if you haven't seen it yet. That's it, folks. You know, as many movies as there are on this list, there were at least 10 others that I'd hoped to get to during the month, but I didn't. I'm picking movies from about 5 different lists. Besides our own collection, there's also my library list, and our Amazon Prime list, and stuff that I've found on YouTube, and stuff that you all have recommended, which I am trying to gradually work my way through. All that amounts to a lot of movies, and the lists are constantly growing, and if there are, say, a dozen things on each list that I'm in the mood to watch during a given month, I might only have the opportunity to get to 3 of them. But that's okay, there's always next month. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this month's selection. Let me know your thoughts on any of the movies that I mentioned in the comments down below. No spoilers, please. And I'll see you again soon. Thanks for watching.